Hello, everybody. Welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Somerville Planning Board. I am Mike Capuano. I'm the chairman of the planning board. With me is Amelia Aboff, Sam Denning, Jahan Habib, and Rob Buchanan. We have a number of items on our agenda tonight, and I will go through them now. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, General Laws, Chapter 38, Section 18, and the governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, as well as Mayor Curtatoni's declaration of emergency dated March 15th, 2020. This meeting of the planning board will be conducted via remote participation. We'll have an audio recording available upon request as soon as possible after the meeting. This meeting is being recorded for anyone who is in attendance, so you are aware of that. We have a number of items on the agenda tonight. We have approval of a few minutes that for previous meetings. We have a public hearing on a case that was previously opened, which was 5 Middlesex Ave, Planning Board 2018-07-MA2-0320. We will have a new case that we'll read into the record and open, which is 365 to 369 Somerville Avenue, which is DRA 2020-0125. And we also have a presentation by city staff on the urban design framework of Boynton Yards. So what I'd like to do now is invite Dan Botman and Melissa Woods to make a brief presentation on the Boynton Yards UDF.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Rebecca, would you mind putting up the front cover and maybe the first page of the UDF, just so for the video's sake? I'm going to talk about urban design frameworks in general, and Melissa will provide further detail about this Boynton Yards one specifically. So everyone is aware that we write neighborhood plans for different areas of the city. We are nowhere near done covering every neighborhood, but I think Union Square is a good reference in how big of a document it is. The topics that it covers are incredibly broad, and the purpose of a UDF is to one, function as a companion document to whatever neighborhood plan is adopted for the area where a master plan proposal is permitted to be submitted. But number two, none of the overlay districts, the sub areas for the master plan development overlay district, are the same size as the land area covered in a neighborhood plan. So Union Square, the area of Union Square is rather large, and Boynton Yards is one sub area of the master plan development overlay district. Union Square is one sub area, Union Square East is another sub area, and we anticipate many other sub areas coming along over time. So we needed a more narrowly focused document to help focus various development partners that will come in and make proposals to develop this area. So the easiest way for me to describe what this document is meant to be is the instruction manual for how a puzzle is put together. If we were quote unquote lucky enough to have a single master developer for a sub area like we have for Union Square, or maybe even the now almost built portion of Assembly Square, which is Assembly Row and Federal Realty, when you have one master developer, it is easier for them to achieve all of the goals that you have in a neighborhood, or I'm sorry, in a sub area from a zoning perspective, because they're the they're the sole party responsible for delivering all that stuff. When you have anywhere between 2 and 15 property owners that might all be submitting master plans, you end up having to coordinate amongst various parties. And the intent of this document is to help facilitate that coordination between various parties. So outside of reading the introduction to this document, I think that is the easiest way for me to describe what its goal is. The ordinance demands that 3 areas be addressed, which is the street network of sub area, ideal locations and types of civic spaces, and advantageous sites for buildings. So you may encounter urban design frameworks that only cover that material. That is not where they have to stop, though. This is a document that is adopted by your board, and your input is obviously the driving factor for what this document says. We have proposed a starting point that at least covers all of the elements mandated by zoning, and includes a couple of items that came out of neighborhood planning or ongoing planning, for instance, from the Union Square neighborhood plan, or ongoing planning for Boynton Yards since the Union Square neighborhood plan was adopted, a few years ago now. So there has been progressing work on Boynton Yards since then, and some of that got codified in zoning, but some of it is more qualitative or subjective, and so sometimes you might see that referenced in here. Because this is not a regulatory document. The zoning ordinance demands that submitted master plans are consistent with this, but are allowed to interpret, make their own proposal that interprets these things that are more qualitative in nature. So things like where the street's located might be regulated by zoning, and then further information is about that specific street is detailed in this urban design framework, or could be detailed in an urban design framework. These will all be different for each sub area also, so you won't see this necessarily all of the same issues being addressed in each framework itself, aside from those 3 items that are mandated by zoning. So again, I think thinking of this as the instructions for how you put puzzle pieces together is the best way to think of it, because you're going to get multiple master plans submitted for Boynton Yards and for other sub areas, and you may even see some people come forward with what's called a contributing lot application that also requires a special permit, just like a master plan requires a special permit. But whereas a master plan entitles you to move on to site plan approval, a contributing lot proposal is just site plan approval with a special permit to build a portion of this neighborhood in accordance with this document. So there is no master plan governing a contributing lot parcel. And so this document, as a guiding, supporting piece of evidence in judging that that contributing lot proposal, is even more important. But this will come into play, holding up what this document says against what somebody submits as a master plan or a contributing lot is just as important, regardless of either type of permitting avenue they take. So I will field any questions that you have related to this, but I feel that that's probably the easiest way to understand the intent of this document. It builds upon the comprehensive plan, the neighborhood plan for Union Square, and the zoning, but provides further context for a smaller area than what is covered by a neighborhood plan, and has more qualitative stuff than what can be put into a zoning regulation.
Yeah, I do have one, because I don't know if we've seen an urban design framework before, have we?
The one you see here on the screen should have been sent around. We don't expect.
I know. I'm just trying to think in the history of when I've been on the board. I'm not sure if I've seen something called an urban design framework.
Yep. This is new, and this is specifically a result of us coming up with the most recent iteration of the overlay districts.
Okay.
And when we realized that there'd be multiple developers coming along, we knew that we needed to create some type of guiding document that would tie them all together and make them all work together.
Okay, and the way I think I understood what you said was that this guiding document, which is obviously a draft, and I presume it'll come to us in a fuller and more finalized version for our adoption at some point.
Right. We are having meetings with a couple of the other divisions still, and we anticipate them adding some further desires that they have. But again, you are in charge of adopting this document, but we are providing you the baseline of information we know, and then you should expect a couple additional items from mobility and public space and urban forestry, and potentially the sustainability department. But not like a ton of new content, but they're still following up.
And so the purpose of this, because it's the first time that this board is seeing something like this, just to make it a little clearer in my mind, that this is designed to be a guideline and framework for development in a kind of a sub-district, as we're calling them, that would be applicable to both someone who might apply as a master developer as well as an individual lot developer. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay, I wanted to make sure I understood kind of what you were saying and the way I think about things. Okay, no, that makes a lot of sense to me. Thank you.
The one item I would add is kind of a little bit covered in the first sentence under the introduction, that urban design is really focused on the arrangement, appearance, and function of urbanism, not necessarily the nitty-gritty details that will come out in a site plan approval application later on. So this is intended to cover items that are of the sub-district scale or the quote-unquote neighborhood scale. Their urban design is different than architecture, as all of you know, but we want to focus on urban design related topics in this document, which then guide either a master plan submittal or a contributing lot submittal.
Anybody else on the board have any questions for Dan on what we've been presented and what we're looking at?
So Melissa's going to follow up and talk about Boynton Yard specifically. And if there's no other questions, I will stop talking. But you all, if anything comes up, feel free to email us with any other further questions. And Michael, like you said, we expect a little bit more detail to come in that for adoption at potentially the next meeting. And we are anticipating feedback from you to be incorporated in the document too.
And for the folks who are kind of watching and listening remotely, I presume all of this stuff will be on the city's website, so people will be able to see the amendments and iterations of this framework.
Yes, I'm even going to make a page on the somervillezoning.com website for these. But if it's not posted right now, I'll get it online.
Thank you. Anybody else have any questions before we move on to Melissa?
Before we move on, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Before we move on to Melissa's portion, I'm just going to take this opportunity to recuse myself from the discussion of the Boynton Yards UDF in particular, due to a conflict of interest with my employer who is developing there. So I will exit the meeting now and stay tuned for a note from Rebecca about when we have picked up other items on the agenda.
Okay. Thank you, Amelia.
My question was related to specifically the plotting of the roadways. When the urban design framework kind of outlines these, sort of optimal public ways, to what extent is that something that future developers would need to kind of, I guess, how rigid is it to adhere to? And part of the reason why I'm asking is, and this came up with our discussion with the DLJ, well, actually it was during a community meeting, I apologize, where, I think that they are planning, at least during the community meeting that they presented, to include or sort of create a new public way through their parcel that they have purchased and sort of aggregated. You know, I think the neighborhood plan had contemplated a underpass, you know, sort of on a 30-year horizon, et cetera. Is the UDF meant to kind of take the neighborhood plan and make it more specific with respect to this sub-district? I guess that's my question. And the follow-up to that is, you know, to what extent, as we're evaluating projects following approval of this, you know, do we need to be ensuring adherence to this document?
So I'll let, some of that is specifics related to Boynton, and I'll let Melissa get into that. But using Boynton as an example, the neighborhood plan and the planning effort that went before it explored many different street alignments in Boynton Yards for new streets to figure out how the best way to unlock the land there, which is one of the reasons that a UDF is necessary, because the plan has ideas in it, not it didn't draw a conclusion. Although if you line up all of those various options on top of one another, you can start seeing where we really thought streets belonged. The zoning went a little bit further in mandating 3 specific streets in all of Boynton Yards. But there, for instance, there could be 15 total different streets that create all the developable blocks. But there are 2 lateral streets mandated and 1 north-south one that's connecting them. But all of the other streets are not required, and we might expect master plans or even contributing lot proposals to move those non-mandated streets around. Even the mandated streets are, and I would expect this in all of our overlays or all of our sub areas, it allows that street alignment to move its center line by 50 feet. And that brings up one of the other reasons for a UDF. If one master plan proposes an alignment of that street that is 50 feet offset from the neighboring, the immediately abutting master plan, then you end up with 2 thoroughfares that dead end and don't meet up, which would be, your board would probably not approve of that anyway. But the whole point of the UDF is to get in front of proposals that don't marry each other and start solving those problems way in advance. So, this is a further distillation of a lot of work that started in the neighborhood plan and then had to keep going, because neighborhood plans inevitably can't solve all of, answer every question that is raised during that process, and they're just too broad. They touch, so many topics, and this is really getting at the physical development of urbanism in this sub area. So it's a narrower topic, and further, the ideas that are in here are further development from the neighborhood plan. We are, technically we are capable of creating these documents for areas that don't have a neighborhood plan, and that might happen for like Twin City Plaza might not be deserving of a full-scale neighborhood plan, but could easily have an urban design framework written for how it might physically develop if it were to ever redevelop. So those are kind of generic examples that I believe got to all of your questions.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions before we move on to Melissa's presentation? Okay, seeing none, I'd like to recognize Melissa Woods to make a presentation on Boynton Yards.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me, Mr. Chair. I'll just make a brief presentation on our Boynton Yards UDF draft that's in front of you this evening. Like Dan mentioned, we've gotten it to a substantial completion, but it's still in a departmental review. What I want to touch on this evening are some of the key principles in the document. Some are required by the zoning ordinance, and others are above and beyond what's required of us. But what's important in this document is that we make priority to create a new walkable street network in the district. I was working with Dan our consulting team on the Union Square neighborhood plan. And when reaching out to communities in Boynton Yards and directly abutting across Webster Street, I remember meeting a constituent that told me about how they got lost in Boynton Yards, you know, their neighborhood. So it's something that is incredibly important. People don't know this land exists. They might have been to Taza, they might have been to Slumbrew, but creating a viable walkable street network through the district is incredibly important for the neighborhood. We want to prioritize land platting for commercial sites. Sometimes things that are called out in urban design frameworks not only highlight what was part of the neighborhood plan, but it's also highlighting how Somerville is going to achieve both housing and jobs balance, but also how to balance our tax base and bring more commercial tax revenue into the city. Another high priority for the neighborhood is to create new civic space. There's one civic space that exists in the district, and that's the South Street Farm. Preserving that is incredibly important and a principle, but also expanding our open space in this neighborhood. With South Street Farm being so small, there's essentially no open space within the neighborhood. So to create a gathering place, if you think about your favorite places in Somerville, Union Square Plaza, Davis Square, Statues Plaza, they're places where the community gathers. So creating that in Boynton Yards is incredibly important. And then the remaining priorities, one that I wanted to touch on is to create a well-balanced neighborhood. One thing that we heard a lot in the neighborhood plan and in subsequent processes is to not create another Kendall Square. And although the commercial tax base and commercial jobs are important to us, so people that live in our community can work in our community, making sure you have enough residential development here for an 18-hour neighborhood is incredibly important. Otherwise, people won't feel safe at night walking through the district if there's not enough activation. So with that, I just wanted to give a brief overview about what's in the UDF. If you have any questions, please let me know. And once again, just let me apologize that you didn't get it until Tuesday, but we thought it would be best to present on it this evening still, and then get any feedback you may have in this short amount of time, and hopefully bring and give you adequate time so in July you'll be more prepared for a vote.
Can I chime in with one question?
Sure.
When are there industry standards or best practices defining the right balance of residential and commercial for the 18-hour neighborhood goal?
You know, I wish there was a leading research paper on that topic. It's a really delicate balance. I think we're talking to developers about what that balance is and how it can be achieved in the neighborhood. I mean, we do have a really dense urban fabric surrounding the district. But one thing that I failed to mention is just how, and I think Dan touched on a little bit, this plan was, the Union Square neighborhood plan was adopted in 2016. And since then, this framework implements both ideas that have evolved in infrastructure study, but also in the public space implementation strategy, that public meeting that happened last December. And one thing that's totally changed, I think, in those last 3 to 5 years is that Somerville has always been fighting for commercial development. And you see in the zoning district, those commercial core zoning districts, that we preserve ideal sites for commercial spaces. And in some of our transformational areas near Kendall Square, we are seeing over the last year to 2 years a complete shift in the market that commercial is actually being valued more than residential. So for this key principle, we're actually fighting for residential to be developed alongside commercial and lab buildings.
Yeah, through the chair, if I may, this is Sarah Lewis, Planning Director. We've embarked over the last year and a half on a study to, we call it the minimum mixed use ratio, which is slightly a misnomer. So a number of years back, there was a split of a 60% commercial, 40% residential goal, so that the goal of our commercial uses were slightly higher than the residential uses, of which, you know, Somerville has always historically been high in. Since that time, the housing crisis has become more abundantly clear. And so we decided to study and make sure we understood if that was the correct percentage. What we have learned is that's not necessarily the best way to go about regulating that. And so there's still a lot of work ongoing behind the scenes to see what that looks like. The other thing that I will add as a piece of information, one of the last minute changes that happened in the zoning ordinance approval was that the city council didn't want to do the 60-40% in Boynton Yards. They have changed it to 75% commercial and 25% residential. So it's currently going to be commercially heavy, and what the outcome of that is yet to be determined. So once we have, I'll be able to give you a lot more detail once we figure out where we're going with the MMUR study and what that looks like. But I know that was a little bit of too much information, but hopefully that helps.
No, that's very helpful. I think knowing that study might be on the horizon is definitely intriguing.
John.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and Melissa, thank you so much for the presentation. I do have a question regarding public transportation and transit access. I understand that this site is close to the Green Line extension. I know that there's a few bus stops ringing the site or the neighborhood, if you will. But is there a consideration around additional bus stops, maybe closer to the site, and just to increase mobility, increase access to the shoppers and residents of Boynton Yards?
Through the chair.
I can take that one if you want.
Sure, go ahead.
This is Sarah Lewis again, through the chair. The intent of Boynton Yards plan with the continuation of South Street is to basically add another cross-town, just as a common term, cross-city connection. And so we're hoping that South Street will actually become a possible bus route. And then the Northern Street, which is Windsor Place currently, Windsor Place Extended, will primarily pedestrian, because we imagine that's the shorter route for walking to the T station.
Got it. Thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Anybody else for right now specifically on Boynton Yards? All right. So thank you very much to Dan, Melissa, to Sarah for answering our questions. At some point in the future, you're going to come back to us with a more fulsome plan that we'll vote on and adopt. Is that right?
Yes, our goal is to have in your packets for July a UDF that doesn't say draft on it and is hopefully ready for adoption.
Great. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, may I add one thing? If we could either add feedback that you provide to us as individuals into that document, or you could, vote in changes at your next meeting or whatever meeting you might do adoption. But we're willing to work with you in whatever way you might want to add things to the document.
Okay, yeah, let's think about the best way to incorporate our changes. I'm not sure what the best way is as of right now. I'd kind of like to see the next version that might incorporate some additional material that we'll have comments on.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Sounds good.
Does staff feel that there's a preferred timetable on this? Like, are we moving to adopt this because we've got master developers ready to come to the table, or is this just something that it's kind of an open-ended plan?
I'd say the answer is twofold. One is that there are developers right now that are pursuing master plan proposals. So they are eager. However, the entitlements available by the district are not available to them until you adopt an urban design framework, because that needs to be judged against the submitted master plan, or the submitted master plan needs to be judged against the urban design framework. So,
right, that's what I thought. So I mean, there isn't a timetable, but in order for us to start moving forward on an appropriate development or a series of developments for the Boynton Yards neighborhood, we should move on this in the reasonably near future, is what I'm hearing.
yes, that's a reasonable conclusion. Yes.
Oh, thank you. All right, guys, thank you very much. Look forward to bringing this up at a future meeting in the reasonably near future. Next on the agenda, should we bring back Amelia, by the way?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'm reaching out to her now.
Okay, thank you. I'm bringing the agenda back up. We have some minutes, which I'd kind of like to leave to the end. We do have two cases. One is the Somerville Ave case, and one is 5 Middlesex Avenue. At the discretion of the chair, I'm going to take these out of order. I'm going to take the Somerville Avenue project first. So Sam, as clerk, do you have the agenda up such that you can read in the notice of public hearing on this case?
Mr. Chair, Rebecca speaking. Can I interrupt you for just one moment?
Please do.
For the good of the minutes, please, could you note that the board is now back in full?
Yes, we now have a complete complement of members of the planning board. Amelia has rejoined us after her brief recusal. So I'm going to invite the clerk of the planning board, Sam Denning, to read in the notice of public hearing for the next case that will take.
This is DRA 2020-0125, 365 to 369 Somerville Ave. Nicolesh Gorokanti seeks a special permit to establish a healthcare service on a pedestrian street.
Thank you very much. Could I please have the applicant or the applicant's representative be unmuted?
Mr. Chair, it's Rebecca speaking. Mr. Gorokanti, I'm unmuting you now. Yes.
Mr. Chair, may I make a brief staff presentation?
Yes, do you want to do that first, or do you want to do that after the presentation by the applicant, which is usually how we do it?
Whatever works for you.
Let's hear from the applicant first, and then I'd like to hear the staff's commentary on the application, which is traditionally how we've done it, and then we've taken public testimony and then our comments, just because it is the applicant's application. So I'd like to hear what they have first, and then I'd kind of like to hear how staff has responded and worked with the applicant and concerns that staff have following the presentation, if you don't mind.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, this is Rebecca speaking. I'm just noting for Mr. Gorokanti that I have sent him a PIN that he needs to enter in order to be able to be heard with how he's checking in.
Okay. And Mr. Gorokanti is not able or does not want to speak. Does he have a representative that will speak on his behalf?
I believe he's able to speak
Hello?
now. Yes.
Okay.
Hello? Hello?
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Hi. Hello. How are you? My name is
Well,
Nicholas Rao Gorokanti. My name is Nicholas Rao Gorokanti. I'm currently a dentist in Somerville on Bow Street. I have opened a small startup in Somerville on 23 Bow Street. Currently, our office is very small, so we are planning on relocating our office to Somerville Ave on the 365 Somerville Ave and 369 Somerville Ave. The reason for that is our lease is coming for expiration, and we did not have anywhere to go. I have purchased these two units in 2018 and 2019, and when I purchased them, there was no zoning changes before then. And after I purchased them, the new zoning laws went into effect. I only found out after I have demoed the units on December, when we pulled the permit on December 11th, and the laws went into effect on December 12th. And we went to go pull the permit for construction, and we were unable to do so. So far, we are awaiting requests from you guys to allow us for a special permit.
We have seen the staff memorandum and some materials attendant to this application. I would invite staff, I think it was Melissa who asked, to please make a staff presentation on this application so that we can hear kind of where we are, because I know that the memorandum had some notes of concern.
Hi, everybody. Melissa Woods again. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this application for health services along a pedestrian street requires a special permit in the district. And so the reason that exists is so we can take a look at the district and make sure it's appropriate. There's uses that we allow, that we permit that are, by right. And then there are uses that we do not allow at all. And this is one of those that's in between that, for instance, a dentist is part of a mixed use neighborhood and part of neighborhood services, but too many health care services, for instance, might be detrimental to the main street. So I just wanted to call your attention to a few things, actually some mistakes I made in the staff report. The previous tenant was Lapel's Dry Cleaning, not laundromat. And so there is one existing dry cleaner in the district right at the corner of Bow and Somerville Ave. So that is a mistake in the staff report referring to a laundromat. And then I received another question from the board about the existing dentist offices in Union Square. And I did not expand as far as the Washington Street dentist at 181 Washington Street. I'm more focused on what exists around Bow and Somerville Ave through the plaza. And there's one existing dentist outside of Mr. Gorokanti that is also located on Bow Street. So in your discussion this evening, I ask that you use the findings in the staff report as direction for your discussion. One thing that is different in this zoning code is not every finding needs to be met. They're used as guidance, and alternatively, you can make different findings in your debate this evening. If you have any questions, please let me know and I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you. Melissa, as you know, I tend to reserve my questions for the applicant and the staff until after we've heard public testimony. I'm going to continue that position and reserve any questions that I have until after we close public testimony. But if there are other members of the planning board that have questions right now, have at it. Okay. Seeing none, what I'm going to do now for anybody that is listed as an attendee, I see 22 folks that are listed as attendees. I don't know how many are here for this particular application, but what I'm going to do is open up this public hearing for testimony on anybody that wants to speak in support of this application. If you want to do that, there's a raise hand button next to your name. If you could hit that, I will call you for testimony by the order in which I see your raised hand, and you'll have 2 minutes to speak. Going to give people another second or so to ask for an opportunity to provide testimony before I close it. Do one more scroll. Seeing none, I'm going to close that portion of the public hearing, and I'm going to open it up to members of the public that want to testify in opposition or otherwise express concern about this application. I'm going to ask you to exercise the raise hand button, and I will call you as I see you. Going once, going twice. Seeing none, I close that portion of the public hearing and bring it back to discussion by members of the planning board. I'm going to start because I did, as I indicated earlier, I did notice some instances in the staff memo that kind of shared some of the concerns that I have about the street usage, about one of the ground floor uses being a waiting room. I know that in our expectations for ground use, we like to see kind of a street level activation, more of a live storefront, I guess, as we've seen in the past. And I don't know if the waiting room necessarily shares that vision that we have. So I'm hoping that the applicant or staff might be able to address any concerns that they have on that, or if the applicant wants to address that concern, I would welcome that too.
So basically, we're going to have two, because it's going to be 2 storefronts. One of the storefronts we're going to be dedicating to artwork that is rotated every quarterly, so that, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
So that we can have that storefront not be seen into the dental office, whereas the other storefront, there's going to be over 30 to 40 people coming in daily every day that is going in. If the staff, if you guys feel like you guys are not comfortable putting a waiting room, we can convert that area to artwork if that were to be much more desirable in that neighborhood, you know?
Mr. Chair, this is Rebecca speaking. Just really briefly, I just wanted to note for the record that was Mr. Gorokanti, the applicant, speaking, and I just want to remind everybody who speaks this evening to please identify yourself before you speak. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you. So what I've seen in the past is where artwork is kind of a nice placeholder, but it's not necessarily the desired use, right? Like if nothing better can come of this storefront, we'll add some artwork and make it look a little prettier and and be a much more dynamic use of the street level windows in use. And I mean, I have no problem with there being your office in this location. My concern is that it doesn't comport with what we usually hope to see on street level use. So I'm hoping that staff might be able to address that concern in any ways that we might be able to mitigate it.
Sure, Mr. Chair, Melissa Woods again. Actually, the waiting room is the most ideal setup for the dentistry office, just because privacy is generally wanted in the dentist office. So in reconfiguration, you know, the other things happening you don't necessarily want on the storefront windows, and I think people seeing people is a good thing. Our zoning requires for storefronts, if there is artistic display, for instance, that there's 4 feet of display. You can't obstruct the windows with something like tinting or film. So there will be adequate room in the existing exam room, and then the ancillary area in the other storefront to have adequate artistic display, and also something a little bit more livelier than, say, what's dedicated in CVS in Magoon Square is just being sort of historic panels. This will be more dynamic.
Okay. So is staff comfortable with the that Mr. Gorokanti's forward in his application as the street use is concerned?
I'm sorry, you broke up. Can you repeat that?
What I was asking was if that's the case, then is staff satisfied with the use and the street activation that Mr. Gorokanti has proposed in the application?
With the, through Mr. Chair, Melissa Woods again, I think for the use in front of you, it's really the best possible storefront that it can be, considering the use.
Okay. Have we heard anything from the ward alderman on this application, or anybody in the neighborhood? Have you had a neighborhood meeting on this proposal?
Mr. Chair, this use does not require a neighborhood meeting, nor have I heard from the ward alderman about this application.
Ordinarily, I just like to hear from as many folks as I can before we make a decision on a kind of well-utilized street front.
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. This is Melissa Woods again. I don't want to make excuses, but I know this particular council is at the moment buried in the budget.
Yeah. Okay. Those are the comments that I have right now. I did have questions on that, and I think they've been addressed. I would like to hear from my colleagues if they have any questions or suggestions for the applicant.
This is Rob Buchanan. My question was whether or not the existing, anything in the existing zoning provides guidance or dictates how both the waiting area and the artwork are illuminated in the evening. You know, in the case of the waiting area, you know, is it is there light splashing out onto the street? And in the case of the artwork, you know, is it illuminated in the evening such that people could actually see it?
Through the chair, Melissa Woods again, that's a really great question. And if definitely, I think could be a condition of approval if your board sees fit. The zoning doesn't require anything of that nature.
Yeah, I mean, I think my preference, you know, would be, you know, one that the some degree of a condition, that however it gets handled, whether, meeting with staff over the lighting plan, perhaps, would be one way to address it, but that the artwork is actually visible from the street. And then second to that, I thought there were provisions regarding light pollution, et cetera. Maybe I was wrong on that one, but I have noticed it just along some of the streets, and to the extent that we can mitigate that, I think that would be helpful.
Through the chair, Rob, you are correct about mitigating light pollution. I'd have to see if it's applicable to this development proposal, but your concern is noted.
Mr. Chair, I think, yeah.
I was gonna say, we can always add an open-ended condition to this, to have the applicant work with staff to mitigate and reduce light pollution where appropriate and necessary. Because it may not be the case, but I totally agree with you that if, to the extent that we can provide some sort of a conditional mitigation for any light pollution that's ongoing for this particular storefront, that we should take that into consideration. Does anybody else have any other questions for the staff or for the applicant before we move ahead on this application? Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I had two questions for the applicant. I think that I believe what was in the staff report said that the existing dental office would remain, but I maybe mistaken, thought Melissa said otherwise in her instructions. If we could confirm what the status of the Bow Street office will be, and also what the hours of operation are anticipated to be.
So my name is Nicholas Gorokanti. So the Bow Street office is going to be taken over by the surrounding restaurants, Celeste and Bara. As you know, due to COVID, they really need more space. Currently, they're expanding to our backyard. Believe it or not, right behind one of my operators, there's going to be people eating dinner right now. I don't mind it, so I block away my windows. It's not a big deal to me at all. And then we're going to be moving our office to Somerville Ave. Our hours of operations are going to be, right now, our 6 days a week, because our office is so small. We only have 2 chairs, and we serve more than 4,000 people per year. Currently, you guys might not like the hours of operation, but it's 8 to 7 every day, Monday through Friday, and Saturday is 8 to 3. But if that's a problem for the chair, I can reduce the number of hours that I can be on Somerville Ave,
Thank you for the clarification.
John, yes, I saw your hand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This question is for the applicant, Mr. Gorokanti. I just want to better understand, since you're going to be moving to a larger space, will that necessitate the hiring of additional staff or changes to your business mix?
Yes. Currently, right now, we were supposed to move to the office, so we currently employ 11 people, and we're going to be employing even more people as we need more room to grow. There's going to be much more staff that is going to be working in the office.
Thank you.
Yes, Rob.
Yeah, this is Rob. I had one other question, and my computer has been really slow tonight, so if I look distracted, that's why. One question I had was, I'm trying to recall the entrances to the existing storefronts as they are today. I can't recall whether they are ADA accessible. Do you, I guess this is a question, either for the staff or the applicant, whether will access to the dental office, will there be an ADA accessible door somewhere?
Currently, this is Nicholas Gorkanti again. Yes, the entrance to the office door is wide enough for ADA accessibility, and we're building our office to have enough restrooms and have enough room to be ADA accessible, unlike our current office, which is not ADA accessible, which has stairs in the front. And we had to get so many permits to have this approved. And we don't want to make the same mistake again and have this dental office be ADA accessible.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any comments or questions for the applicant? I actually do have one comment that is, I thought of when you referenced the office hours that you were going to have. Could you remind me of, were they 8 to 7 during the weekdays?
Yes, this is Nicholas Gorkanti again. Yes, 8 to 7.
Okay. I just want to say, Mr. Gorkanti, as someone who regularly tries to schedule my dentist appointments as early in the morning or as late in the day as I possibly can, because we all, work for a living. I think that's a very good thing that you're allowing folks to, to have opportunity to come and get treatment kind of after normal business hours, because it's so difficult to be able to do that for most people. So I, for one, support those longer business hours for a dentist's office. So, thank you for that. Okay, if there's no other commentary by members of the planning board, the chair will move to approve this application with the conditions that were raised and proposed by the members tonight, relative to the mitigation of light pollution to the staff's satisfaction. I'm sure the staff can come up with an appropriate condition that will reflect that concern of the board. Second by the clerk, Sam. So all in favor of approving this application as conditioned, with a roll call vote as we do, because it is a virtual meeting. The chair votes aye.
Sam votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Rob votes aye.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gorkanti. Good luck.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. We are now going to take the second case, the second to last case on our agenda, which is 5 Middlesex Avenue. We don't need to read in the notice of public hearing again, because it was previously opened and continued. So what I would like to see is the applicant or the applicant's representative be given access to the meeting and be able to put up as much presentation material as they may have. And I would love to hear from the applicant.
Mr. Chair, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this is the case. I forget the name of the name of it, but 5 Assembly. I'm going to recuse myself due to a conflict of interest.
Okay. So Rob, what I'll ask you to do, if you want, is to hold on with a mute and a camera off until we're ready to take up the minutes. Otherwise, we can vote on minutes with 4 of us, and you can call it a night.
Very well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll wait for Rob to disconnect and ask for a presentation by the applicant at 5 Middlesex Avenue, please.
Hold on, just Mr. Chair, this is Rebecca speaking. I think Rob is still with us. There we go. Just a second, Mr. Chair. This is Rebecca speaking. I'm just having a couple little issues. Technically, I'm going to be making John Sullivan a presenter so that he can be able to present on behalf of the team, and I'm working to unmute.
Okay, we can see that.
All right, give me 1 second. Sorry, I'm having just a little technical issue here. Mr. Carboni, I can believe we can hear from you now.
I'm here, Rebecca. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Thank you again. For the record, Peter Carboni, one of the principal owners of Novaya Real Estate Ventures here in Boston. Here with me tonight are my partners, Ed Nardi and John Baxter from Crescent Development. We are the principal owners of the property at 5 Middlesex Ave. We've owned it for, I think, almost going on 2.5 to 3 years in that range. And we're here with the full development team. Well, we have some exciting changes to the project. I know, Mr. Chairman, you've been involved with this with us, or at least on the board, since we were given our master plan approval back in June of 18.
Mr. Carboni, can I interrupt you for just 1 minute? I apologize. For the purpose of members of the board and members of the public, this master plan was originally approved under the old zoning. So when you've applied to us now for an amendment to that PUD, if staff can correct me if I'm not correct, that this still falls under the auspices of the old zoning under which the original PUD was adopted. That's still correct, right?
Mr. Chair, Sarah Lewis at the vote. Yes, that is correct. And I was going to give you a brief overview for the new members of the board as to what the previous approval was. And I'm ready to answer any questions on those if that helps as we move forward with this revision.
Yeah, let's hear from you, Sarah, after the presentation by the applicant, because this will be a nice overview of what they're proposing as an amendment. And then you can give everyone kind of a fulsome history of where we got to where we are, so people can appreciate the considerable input that that we've had as a board, as a city staff, members of the public, elected officials, et cetera, et cetera. I'd like to see where we are now, so that this is what we'll be voting on, so I'd like the public to see it first.
Okay.
Mr. Carboni, sorry for the interruption. I just wanted to make that clear for everybody that was listening. So please continue.
Sure, no worries. Again, Peter Carboni, just for the record. And we concur that we are under the old zoning as well, so we can drill down on that as much as little as you'd all like. So just to kind of go back, so we again, in June of 2018, our master plan was approved. It was approved for a little bit under 1.5 million square feet of office, residential, commercial, and retail development. Shortly after that, we did approve MEPR approval, and we signed a fairly extensive development agreement with the city. We had since sold off a parcel to Wood Partners, who've been doing the largest of the residential projects that are a component of our mixed-use project. And about 9 months ago, we signed an agreement with the folks from Biomed Realty. So you're going to hear from Sal Zino in a few minutes, who's their vice president of development. So both we and they, I can safely say, are very excited about bringing this project to Somerville and actually getting going on some construction in addition to the residential, which is already ongoing. So again, this is an active live project. I'm sure you're all very familiar with Assembly Row. I was involved with it 20 years ago with the initial permitting of the Assembly Square Mall, so it's good to get back involved with it. The major components of the amendment, so really what we're focusing on today, we're going to give you a lot of overview, just a little bit of history, but primarily the amendment does the following. It converts over what we had a smaller residential building that was about 190,000 square feet, converts that over to more of a commercial building, which will likely be more of a lab and office building that Biomed would develop. It adds about 80,000 square feet of innovation space, which is really the only additional space to the plan. So about the 1.5 million square feet, there's an additional 80,000 of innovation. Sal can talk a little bit more about what innovation space is. It also provides for an increase and more accessible open space. I think you're going to find that through the master planning that we've done, as well as this new plan actually takes down or will take down 5 Middlesex, which is the building that's been up for since the late 60s, early 70s, and replaced with all new buildings. And lastly, it adjusts for the parking count really to convert the residential over to commercial. So it's really just an adjustment from on sort of a per square foot per unit basis to convert the parking over. So those are really the major things. We have our architects from SGA, as well as Bill Harris from Perkins Will, who are going to run through those. We have had I know neighborhood meetings are important. We had one that Alderman McLaughlin ran virtually back on April 29th that we participated in. I thought it went very well. We probably could have a few members of the audience that were there, but I thought that went very well. We had some good questions that we were able to address. So we've had that. We've also had them in the past for our prior meetings. The amendment, once the amendment is, if it is approved, each of these buildings and components will require special permits going forward. So typical of the master plan. If we are hopeful enough to achieve the master plan amendment, Biomed would later be bringing applications for special permits for each of the buildings, as well as for the open space. So the open space, you're going to see there's some conceptual design, but it will be subject to its own permitting later on. So we're going to talk a little about that as well. So I think with that, what we're going to do is I'm going to turn it over in a second to Sal, who can give you some background on Biomed. And then from there, we're going to hand it to a couple of the architects, and Sal will introduce those. So we'll probably have a 15-20 minute presentation, somewhere in that range, and then we'll come back for questions and whatnot. So I think at this point, let me turn it over to Sal.
Yes, I'm unmuted. Thank you, Peter, and thank you, members of the board, for taking the time tonight. Sarah and Rebecca and George also. I'm not sure if you're in the background there, George, but we appreciate the time. As Peter mentioned, my name is Sal Zinno. I'm the Vice President of Development with Biomed. For those of you less familiar with us, Biomed is a company that primarily owns and operates life science real estate with about 11.2 million square feet in between the United States and the UK, and about 2.4 million square feet in our development pipeline. Spent the last 11 years of my career in Kendall, working on some of the projects that I think a lot of people may be familiar with. A few of them are showcased here on the right. The one on the top right is actually in Boston. The Genzyme Center is ours. We're responsible for managing the Kendall Square Farmers Market, the community ice skating rink there, the canoe and kayak launch on the Broad Canal. Heavily focused on activities and amenities in what we recently rebranded as the Canal District, their development in Kendall. So it's just a few of the photos of some of the work. Many of the projects has actually been personally involved with. Canoe and kayak, Glass House is a retail location, a restaurant at the base of our building at 450 Kendall. Some public art, and then a few images of some of our lab space. So you can see that, that's one of the things I think we're most excited about with this site is, all of the city's work and Federal's work at Assembly Row. It really complements our plans to create a significant commercial life science innovation cluster well. So that everyone spent a lot of time on it, and we appreciate it, and spent a lot of time on our proposal. We have a lot to show you tonight. Hope you enjoyed. I'm going to turn it over to Bill Harris from Perkins and Will to talk a little bit about our plans, and follow up with some questions at the end.
Actually, I'll defer to John.
Thanks, Bill. Thank you, Sal. This is John Sullivan with SGA. We've been involved in this project for a number of years and led the master planning efforts to get the project approved just about 2 years ago in June of 2018. So what I wanted to do here tonight was just to run through the previously approved plan, highlight some of what was approved in 2018 and refresh everyone on the site and of the goals of this as a larger scale master plan development. Highlight a little bit of what will change, and then I will pass it over to Bill Harris to describe the proposed amendment. But really just to refresh the board and to refresh the community as to the site that we're speaking about. This is an aerial photo of the 5 Middlesex Avenue site, prior to when we started designing this in 2018. So what you see is, an existing 4-story office building that's just over 160,000 square feet, a lot of surface parking, really a large scale block that that was just supported by this existing building. And I think 2 things to note on this plan is just the relationship to Foley Street and Revolution Drive, which are main pedestrian ways from the Orange Line MBTA station, and then the surrounding retail for a Home Depot and the Kmart site and the relationship to the highway. So that's just a little bit for context. And here you see the previously approved plan and its relationship to Interstate 93, its relationship to the build out and development of Assembly Row. And then, very important to note, the relationship to, to the Assembly Square Orange Line MBTA station. We wanted to, highlight some of the thinking that went into the original plan, and I think that was really focused around a couple things. One was, finding the opportunity to take this really large scale block and to break it down into the appropriate scale, providing pedestrian friendly, walkable streets that, really drew off of the fabric established by Assembly Row. And also to think about, open space as, an important component of this plan, but also in the context of, the network of green spaces that have started to evolve and have continued to evolve in this neighborhood. So I think, that highlights not only the thinking at the time, but also really what we feel like has been approved upon with this new proposal. Looking at, our guiding principles for this project, again, they're focused around open space. You'll see what had been approved was a central open space, which now will be expanded upon. Connectivity in terms of, really taking, what is essentially a large scale surface parking lot and threading this back into the city's fabric. And then a mixed use program, which at the time in 2018 was thought about, primarily as residential, office, and retail, which now introduces a large scale life science component, which we're very excited by. So, those principles still hold true to the plan, but have been expanded upon in what you see here tonight. So looking at what had been approved in 2018, again, this is a 1.49 million square foot development, which was comprised of a residential and office oriented program. Just under 1 million square feet of that was focused on commercial uses. Just over 500,000 square feet of that was focused on residential uses. At the time, we had just under 500 residential units approved. Again, 979,000 square feet of commercial office space, which included the existing building, and just over 1,700 parking spaces. I think what you see in terms of the plan's layout really shows, the existing building remaining at 5 Middlesex Avenue, which was, part of the plan as proposed in 2018. And really drove the geometry for the site, allowing some of the rest, the remainder part of the site being available for, development or for open space. But its geometry, again, really set the tone for what was possible. And with that, we looked at, ways to activate the public realm. We've, established a kind of a site's main street called Road K. Which runs parallel to Grand Union Boulevard. It's really, a pedestrian-oriented, walkable street. It has a way that, accepts a festival street type of condition. So that's really what we saw as our, our pedestrian way. And then we have some access roads and some access points that you see here too. Road L, which is running between Grand Union Boulevard and Road K, which supports, some service and access to the northernmost block. And then really the bulk of the development, sits below Road K and around the existing building. So, what you see is, Block 23, and actually it's probably best if I go back to the last image, but that is, residential oriented, portion of the site, an 8-story building that supports just under 330 residential units. The largest commercial block is Block 21, which at the time, proposed a certain amount of above grade parking in the form of a 6-level podium with 2 office towers that sat above that, 10 and 14 stories. And then a commercial building, a 10-story commercial building along Revolution Drive, and a residential building that was 17 levels, kind of in the center of the site, right next to what was a feature open space, between that building and 5 Middlesex along Road K. So back to the street layout, and we can go through this quickly, but we really just wanted to highlight again that street hierarchy that establishes Road K as the prime, main street through the development, and then just highlights access points for vehicles and for service access along Foley Street, along Middlesex Avenue, serving 2 of the blocks, and a couple of points along Road K. And I think it's just important to note that because there have been some positive changes to those access points in the new proposal. The lower level, along Road K is meant to provide, retail and active uses. And you can see how that lays out on this plan, and can also compare it to what's proposed as part of the amendment. And then one other thing to note here is that there was a fire station contemplated in conversation with the city along Middlesex Avenue at the corner of Middlesex Avenue and Foley Street. So one last plan to review was really our parking approach, which again at the time, because of the positioning of 5 Middlesex Avenue, really pushed us to solve for most of the site's parking at Block 21. It's a large block, and the thinking was that some above grade parking, which would be worked into the fabric of the building, would sit beneath two towers, but there's a considerable amount of above grade parking as part of this solution. So you can see that as the buildings raise vertically. We're excited by the mix of uses, but again, this was focused more on office. There's the 10-story existing building 10-story proposed building towards Revolution Drive, to the just to the south of the existing 5 Middlesex Avenue building, which you can see right in the heart of the plan, and then the towers that push to the north, which again is a residential tower and two commercial office towers. So we also wanted to highlight briefly the work that's happened over the last 2 years. So, again, we were excited, by the approval in 2018. We've thought about this as a phased development, which has already started to occur. Block 23, as Peter mentioned, was sold to Wood Partners, and they put forth a 8-story residential, multifamily residential building that had some, active uses at the ground plan, which was approved for special permit in November of 2018. Construction is currently in process, and we have an image of that on the next slide. But this really highlights where that is on the plan, and along with it, what infrastructure is also underway, roadways and utilities along Road K and Road L. So I think it's important to note that completion is expected in the first quarter of 2022. And just to kind of highlight what that looks like, and again, this is even probably a little bit of out of date with ongoing construction, which has just started back up. But this shows you that Block 23 as a construction site, Road K and Road L, starting to be implemented here, and just highlights the relationship to to the ongoing construction and development at Assembly Row. So with that overview, I'm going to turn it over to Bill Harris from Perkins & Will to talk about some of the proposed changes.
Thank you, John, and thank you, board. As John mentioned, Bill Harris, I'm a principal with Perkins & Will Architects, and I'm really excited to be here this evening and appreciate your time in reviewing this proposed amendment to the master plan. So what we'll do is just walk through a little recap of what Peter introduced at the beginning of the presentation in terms of what the elements of the amendment, the primary elements are, by list, and then we'll demonstrate them in the drawings. So to recap, fundamentally, this is driven by a change in the program of converting 190,000 square feet of residential into commercial space intended for life science use, along with an addition of 80,000 square feet of innovation space. The highlight, the sort of centerpiece of this amendment, both for us, the development and design team, and also for the community, is an increase in the total usable public open space. And you'll see that we've made a concerted effort to enhance the open space, not just for nature, but as a real civic space, as a contribution to the community. We also have an increase in contiguous open space that is resulting from the demolition of 5 Middlesex Avenue, as was previously mentioned. We're also in this amendment identifying and proposing some additional small streets that enhance the connectivity and the pedestrian-friendly nature of the site. There's an extension from Road L down to Middlesex Avenue that we'll show you, and also an additional private way, a service road, and that will result in about 50% more ground floor active use fronting the public ways and open space. In terms of parking, John mentioned the Block 21 parking podium and the original approved master plan. And what this design proposes is actually a 50% reduction in the overall ground floor parking footprint. I'll explain that a little bit more in a moment. And a 50% reduction in parking areas with exposures along public streets. That's been replaced with active use and with retail. And also, we've relocated the entrance to the parking areas from the primary pedestrian streets to the private way and exposures that are not on Folio Road K. And finally, as part of this amendment, under the originally approved master plan, the sustainability target was LEED certified, and the amendment is proposed for LEED Gold. So that's the recap. And now looking at the context of the site, John gave you a tour of the previous layout, and the significant things to look at here are that we have taken Block 21, which is the lower left side of our site, and divided it in half, so that we've continued the anticipated network of streets that will eventually replace the Kmart building, and have significantly enhanced the sort of pedestrian-friendly and scale of this particular development. So that's running sort of left to right on the page. And then we've also extended Road L, which is the east-west or vertical road that's in the middle of the site. In the originally approved master plan, that ran next to the residential building, the one that's sort of in pink here as it's shown, and then stopped at Road K. And what we're proposing in this amendment is to actually continue Road L down to Middlesex. So this gives you a little bit of context. What we've also done is dashed in blue the primary pedestrian paths now around the site, which go not just around the site, but actually through and into the site as well, which we're very happy about. What is not dashed in, but is certainly part of the pedestrian activity and public access, is that the pathways do continue all the way around that park space against the face of the buildings. Next slide, please. Okay, so here, zooming in a little bit, and just to give you a little refresh of the existing condition, that 5 Middlesex building, the existing 5 Middlesex, because of the way it's positioned on the site, it really did inhibit the ability to centralize a green space for us. So once the decision was made to remove that building, it opened up a host of opportunities in terms of getting the public space. And then you can see the mass of grade parking that's there now that will be replaced by this development. Next. Okay, so here we are. This is the ground floor as these buildings meet the ground, meet grade. And you can see that on the left side, we've taken block 21, which was originally a single block, and identified it in two pieces. 21A, which is on the east side. North is to the left, so east is up in this particular, in all the drawings that you see. 21A, and that's one of the new commercial R&D office buildings, and introduced a service road going left to right and a structured parking building on the west side of that. You can also see that Road L now continues from the east side next to the block 23 residential building all the way down to Middlesex Avenue. So already we've broken that big mass of building in block 21 into two pieces. What we've also done is by eliminating the residential tower, which sat sort of in the middle of the block, and by eliminating 5 Middlesex, we've really opened up the opportunity for that central open space, that civic space, to be the showpiece and the centerpiece of this development. Additionally, you'll see blocks 24 and 26 are actually two separate towers for the commercial use. But at the lowest levels, at the first floor levels, they're actually connected with an opportunity for space that encloses and protects the open space of the park and shelters it from the noise, the pollution, and so forth of Interstate 93, which is just to the south. So it makes for a much more quiet and focused park area. What we're also showing in this drawing is the red arrows that represent the access to the parking. And previously in the drawings that were shown in the approved master plan, the access to the parking was from Foley Street on the left and Road K. So both are pedestrian-friendly streets, and we've taken the access to parking off those streets and put them on the sideways. So we're thinking that that is a significant improvement. As John mentioned before, we're anticipating a fire station, so that's located in the same corner that it was before. And you can see some purple along Foley Street, which is represents retail. So we're really anticipating that the path from East Somerville along through the Kensington Connector will be a very nice path to the to Assembly and to the T past the civic use of a fire station and the retail and the landscape along that north side of our site. Next slide, please. Okay, so here we're going up a level, and you can see there that the shape of the towers is distinct from the ground floor plan are starting to reveal themselves. So we have in block 21A, the commercial building, 21B is the structured parking, blocks 24 and 26 begin to reveal themselves above the connected lower floors, and then they surround the park area. Next slide, please. This is going up just a little bit more, and you can see from the higher levels, you're looking down now at the overall site, and we'll have a presence of the sort of a gateway presence along 93 for not only our development, but all of Assembly Row, which we're very pleased to sort of anchor in this corner. And next slide. I'm going to pass the mic to Andrew Arbaugh from Copley Wolf Design Group, who can go into a little bit more detail about the green space design. Andrew?
Hi, I'm Andrew Arbaugh. I'm a principal at Copley Wolf Design Group, Landscape Architecture. So the amended master plan includes the open space programming developed with the community and city staff during the original master plan process. It's important to note that the open space will continue to be developed through community process and PSUF review, and will be subject to a separate application related to the open space itself. The space as currently envisioned is anchored by a large flexible open space ringed with rain or pollinator gardens. A bosque or filtration grove lies to the north of the open space. This dense canopy of tree spacing is intended to provide a cool shaded gathering space that connects the flexible pergola plaza with the town square. The town square, it's a Wooner for shared street that is bisected by Road L. The street has the ability to be closed down for street festivals, farmers markets, or other public events. It's one of two shared streets being proposed in the master plan, the second being the Road K Festival Street to the plan north. The festival streetscape is the area that extends between this space and the central lawn, creates a transitional filter between the two zones, and provides a shaded linear space in its own right. If we go to the next slide. Within this diagram, you can see the intent and relationships between the proposed landscape spaces. One thing to notice too is that as part of the amended master plan, a robust public art component is being proposed that will work in concert with the landscape. Next page. So the materials palette is intended to relate to the palette that's established at Assembly Row as a whole, but through a slightly more contemporary lens. And again, this palette will continue to be developed and reviewed through community process and PSUF review. And then final slide. And then this is the piece that we're really most excited about. The revisions to the master plan, as Bill mentioned, have resulted in the creation of about 0.8 acres of additional usable open space. The removal of that Block 25 residential tower and the existing 5 Middlesex also allows the space to be contiguous, resulting in a significantly improved, significant improvement to the open space footprint. With that, I'll pass it back to Bill.
Thanks, Andrew. So next slide, please. So here we'll give you, this is an overview looking towards 93 and East Somerville. And we're really excited about this. Of course, we're not talking about the building design or the architecture per se. That would come under a special permit application separately. But what you really see here is that this green civic space is really inviting the community in. You can see that that angle and sweep is a gesture that continues the streetscape, that encourages engagement, and that really takes advantage of the whole concept of Road K as being a festival street. So we imagine that that the opportunities for programming and so forth will really be quite rich in the way these sites are connected by this central civic space. Next slide. So here's a view. Road K is to our right, and Revolution Drive and the Home Depot are behind us. So we're looking towards Block 21. Block 24 is to our left. And this represents the sense of quality of the open space that we're anticipating for the design of that green space. And you can see that it offers opportunities for public gatherings and so forth. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see from the opposite side. So this is looking from Road L, so block 21 is behind us, and we're looking towards block 26. And you can see that we're all optimistic about a day in the future when we'll be able to gather in groups and not have to wear masks. And we're designing for that time and creating plenty of opportunities for these this programming and this activity that that really enriches the lives of all of us. And then one more perspective view, sort of from the same orientation. You can see we're still looking from Road L, but we're a little bit closer to the open space. And we like this view because it really represents the variety of landscape treatments that, again, are consistent with what was approved for the original master plan, and it's quite rich in its biodiversity. And so with that, I'd like to pass the mic back to Salzina, who can speak about some of the public benefits for this design.
Thank you, Bill. So I'm just gonna quickly wrap this up. Thank you for the slide. So, obviously I think one of the things that's allowed us to really make this project better is the elimination of 5 Middlesex and the addition of the open space. And I hope that everyone on the board is equally as pleased with where we've headed with this. Obviously on the financial side and with respect to the jobs, we want to highlight a few things. We expect that roughly 1.5 million square feet of life science real estate is going to bring about 4,000 additional jobs to the area, construction jobs, and then also permanent life science jobs. Obviously, there's the real estate tax revenue increased with associated with the conversion of the residential to commercial, and also furthermore likely with the additional NOI on the life science space. And then there's the additional linkage and infrastructure funding. And the 12.1 million in housing linkage that again is coming from the conversion of the residential to commercial. So that's all we have for tonight. We're going to open it up to Q&A or comments or however you'd like to take it from here, but that's it for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to say, well, you know what? Actually, does staff want to give a brief overview of where we were and how we got here? I thought the applicant did a pretty good job. I'm also happy to have staff give an overview of this application and the PUD that surrounds it.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, this is Sarah Lewis.
Sarah.
I think the team did a great view of sort of doing the comparison of the, sort of what this revision entails. The staff report that you have before you is a draft solely for the reason that with a project this large and complicated, we always like to hear public testimony and the board discussion prior to finalizing the report. However, this is a fantastic improvement. And actually, if I can call him out, the first time that I met Ed Nardi, who is one of the owners of Crescent Development, one of the first questions out of my mouth is, can't we get rid of that old building if we're going to redevelop this area? And so when they came in with this proposal, it was quite exciting to see. And sort of understanding how this balances a lot of the residential and retail that already is in Assembly as a neighborhood. So I think this seems like an improvement to us on the staff side of things, but we're obviously more than interested in your opinion and guidance moving forward.
I have several comments and a few questions, but I'm going to reserve them until I hear from members of the public. I will preface my non-comment with a comment. And it's, as I remember the previous public testimony being generally strongly in support of the concept of this plan. And one of the concerns that was raised by more than one person, actually, I think I see Wig in the audience here. I think Wig brought it up, and I think a few other folks did last time, was the use and the accessibility of the public open space that was at that point kind of constrained by the existing building. And the application, and if I'm remembering back from 2 years ago, I want to say I saw a proposed a series of drawings by members of the public, and this seems, in my mind's eye, to come close to kind of what members of the public had suggested would be a better alternative. So I think that definitely speaks to the applicants listening to members of the public and listening to the community and to this board as to where we ultimately wanted this project to go. But in case my memory fails me, I would love to hear from members of the public once any members of the planning board get any preliminary questions out of the way, if you have any.
Mr. Chair, could we ask, this is probably a question for staff, because this is an amendment, what that requires of us procedurally?
Certainly, this is Sarah Lewis. So generally with revisions, what you consider are their changes rather than the overall plan. So it's not as if you're seeing this for the first time. It's to talk about the changes that have been made. So for example, obviously the main one is the existing building being taken down, and then the change to more commercial space instead of residential. So it's those sort of aspects of the urban design realm are of most interest. As far as the technicalities go, PUD under the previous ordinance is very similar to the process that you just approved for further down Middlesex on the Edge Assembly project. So the master plan special permit is the newer version of a PUD. So it still has, as they mentioned in the presentation, should the PUD revision be approved, each of the buildings, each of the open space still have to come back in for what is now under the new ordinance called a site plan approval. Under the old version will be a design and site plan review. So it's a very similar process, just with more confusing terminology. Does that help?
It does. Thank you.
May I ask, Mr. Chair, one question of the applicant? It was just an item that I did not hear properly due to my poor internet connection. There was a note about changes to parking along Street K, and I'm afraid I just didn't catch what it was. If the applicant could please repeat himself.
Hi, this is Bill Harris. What I was noting about parking along Road K was not the parking per se, but the access to the structured parking. So the turnoff is to get into the parking garage. In other words, you needed to drive down Road K. Now you don't. That, as a festival street, gets a little bit more privacy and less traffic.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any of the members of the planning board have questions for the applicant or for staff before I open it up to public testimony? And as a reminder to members of the board, because we will be taking public testimony and providing the applicant with comments, we will have at some point in the future a more finalized version of the staff memorandum to us. So we won't be taking a vote on this tonight. This is our opportunity to take what the public has and will say tonight, as well as our own commentary, have the staff incorporate it into a more finalized memorandum to us, and for us to take up that final memorandum at a date to be determined in the future. So just so everybody knows what tonight is, it's an opportunity for us to engage with the applicant and give direction and suggestions to them and to staff. And we will reconvene at some point with a more finalized draft once or more than once more in the future. So this is an ongoing, it has been an ongoing project for a number of years, and we are just in a better place than we were a few years ago. So just to remind everybody of where we are and what is expected of us tonight. I am now going to open it up to public testimony for members of the public. I see 18 attendees. I think many of you may be affiliated with the application, but we'll see. So I'm going to open it up to public testimony for anybody that wants to speak in support of the application. There's a raise hand button that I would ask you to click next to your name, and I will call you in the order in which I see your raised hand. So I'm scrolling down, I see one. I'm going to give folks a minute or two, a few seconds rather. Okay. I'm going to open it up and I'm going to call Wig Zamor, but because it's recorded, Wig, I think just name and address for the record on the audio and video, please.
Sure, thank you. This is Wig Zamor, 13 Highland Avenue. And if the applicant could put up one of the site plans, perhaps the one that shows the building outlines, 80 to 90% of my comment is simply that this is a phenomenal improvement, just as Ms. Lewis has said and Chairman Capuano has implied. The freedom to open up the plan with the idea of no longer retaining 5 Middlesex really gives an awful lot of value to the site, which I fully hope is realized by the applicant. The open space speaks for itself, the change. This is great, thank you. I want to spend just a little bit of time on smaller things, but I'm just really pleased with the progress here and thank everybody for that. 2 smaller points. The Edge development has kind of set a standard with Well Platinum. I know you guys are going for something similar. They also agreed to use MERV 16 on their roof, which is a vastly better system than MERV 13, so I hope that will be considered. Secondly, I think it might be possible for you to build the underground garage of Block 21B up to 5 Middlesex and maybe alleviate going under one of the buildings that will replace 5 Middlesex. You could get a head start on that. That's just a thought to be checked out. Lastly, I want to make a bigger point, which goes to the city as well as to the applicant, and maybe even more to the city. As I look at Assembly Square, it's 150 acres, the same as downtown Boston from South to North Station, which has 14 major transportation stations. And I do not see the potential of Assembly Square in the long run, which will certainly involve more than 10 million square feet of mixed use, without a connection from McGrath through to Foley Street and the T-stop. And the current mayor tried to get a master plan going, and there was some opposition by elected officials, but I think that that really needs to be focused on sooner rather than later. It's something that will take a while to accomplish, but that will bring the middle of Somerville to the middle of Assembly and do away with having to go in on either end. With regard to that, I think you can see the failure of having done that early in the green space on the jug handle off of Middlesex. That green space is not really usable by the public. It's up against the roadways, and honestly, there may as well be a building section in there and more built square feet. So I just wanted to make that big point, but go back to, and I can probably send a written comment, but just go back to thanking everybody for this really terrific improvement.
Greg, thank you very much for your testimony. It was, in fact, I won't re-invite you to speak because we're still in public testimony. I think it was your proposed design that this looks somewhat similar to from a few years ago. So is there anyone else that wants to speak in support of this application? If so, please click the raise hand. And I apologize to folks in the audience. It looks like my video was freezing a few times. But I was able to hear everything and see everything. So, okay, I see no other folks with raised hands now. I'm going to close that portion of the public hearing, and I'm going to open it up to members of the public that want to testify in opposition to the application or otherwise express concern for it. Please hit your raised hand and I'll call on you. Once, twice. Closed to the public on this application. I'm going to close that portion of the public hearing and open it up again for the planning board to have discussion with the applicant and with staff. Okay, go for it, Sam.
If the applicant could give just a very brief answer on the rationale for moving from residential to commercial space for a significant chunk of this plan.
I think, so this is Peter Carboni. Can you hear me okay? I think maybe I'll address it and then, and if Sal wants to comment, as well. It's a relatively straightforward answer is Biomed is in the business of developing lab and office space, as I'm sure if you look at their portfolio in terms of what they do. That was really the central focus. That's not, they're really not focused on doing residential, and the more resi you do is only going to take away. In order to develop the right amount of scale, Sal can speak better, but in order to get the amount of scale to the project, it's to get a large company to do these, they need enough square footage, enough FAR to entice tenants who may want to grow from 100,000 to 500,000 to 1 million square feet. So if you start taking away the commercial, just won't be as marketable a site from a commercial standpoint. I would venture to guess that it may be Biomed or even others that may follow up, or even with Federal, and you might end up seeing more lab and more biotech in the district, because people are planting seeds over there for this type of use. When we did originally the plan, just to point out, Wood Partners did the large building over there, which is under construction right now, and they have they've got what, 20% affordable, so we're developing about 80 affordable units over there, 80 to somewhere in that range, plus or minus. That will be, not when I say we, the project will be bringing to the city. So it's bringing a lot. I think Sal pointed it also. I think there's about a $12 million linkage payment for additional housing needs in and around the city that will be generated. So I think combination of what the project will develop for residential coupled with the affordable housing, and then that move towards the life science. If we can't develop enough life science, it just won't be that attractive of a site for users like a Biomed that really needs scale, or it just doesn't make sense for them. Sal, I don't know if you want to follow up with anything on that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, Peter. You're spot on. We don't really focus on residential, but the idea of scale and the way we looked at this was always, that this part of Somerville is somewhat of an untested market for lab. So to the extent that we can create more density here and create kind of some of, that cluster effect that we have in Kendall and makes areas like that so successful, more square footage was always more appealing for that reason. I think just, looking back at the resi, not that it was ever a consideration, but I think the proximity to 93 and then the impact that it would have had on the overall master plan, incorporating, that additional use would have taken us back probably a couple steps from where we are today with respect to the open space of the new master.
Thank you. That's helpful. I would just add briefly that based on some of the comments we've heard before and the specific change in this project concerning the balance between residential and commercial, if staff could address that a little more explicitly and about the balance of those in the neighborhood before, referring to thinking about a comment that Ms. Lewis made earlier. If staff could address that balance explicitly and potentially quantitatively in the staff memo, that would be appreciated.
So very definitely noted. We'll do some research on that. I'm sorry, I don't have those exact numbers here. I can only speak anecdotally right now. So we will definitely check that for you.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Either of my other colleagues? I have a little bit more to say about this, but I'd love to hear from you first.
If I may, Mr. Chair, from what I can tell, not having been on the board during the first round of approvals here, this does seem like a really substantial improvement. So I appreciate the applicant's attention to improving the open space and what appears to be a very thoughtful design regarding the street layout and sort of transitions between other parts of the neighborhood. I'm very mindful that the applicant is before us seeking sort of a request for an additional 80,000 square feet, which is not insubstantial, and that there have been a lot of pushes from this board and from the new zoning ordinance and from the community, the sustainability standards for the construction. And I appreciate the shift towards LEED Gold that's being targeted here, but I do question, in light of the adjacent edge development that's pursuing a much higher standard for both well and LEED, whether that's sufficient here. As I think you know, I tend to read these sections of submissions in a lot of detail because it's something I think is very important to the city. And I was really dismayed to see that the section on the proposed sustainability standards provided in the zoning compliance narrative literally stopped mid-sentence because it was so insignificant as to have been forgotten by the applicant. So I would really like to see more detail and more thought given to that moving forward, whether it's here or in the special permit phase, ideally both.
Anyone else for right now? Okay, so I'm going to say a few things. I've said some in the prior to the applicant in the midst of testimony. But first of all, I'm going to say I didn't realize you guys had the building where Glass House is. I'm a huge fan of Glass House, so already I like you guys. Yeah. So this is a substantial step forward in meeting what I think we as a previously constituted board, what city as staff, and what Alderman McLaughlin and what folks in the public had to say at the first iteration of this development and the plan. We all wanted better use of the green space. We all wanted maximization of commercial and lab and R&D. I think we all agreed that we'd like to refrain from too much residential development close to the highway for a whole host of reasons. So the fact that you're adding, more commercial space and more lab and R&D kind of matches with what we have been asking folks to do for quite a long time. So that's definitely a step in the right direction. The fact the old building is coming down, I hate that building. So I'm glad Sarah shares my disdain for that particular parcel and that it's going to be two bigger towers that I'm waiting to hear from some of our air experts when the actual applications for the buildings themselves come forward. It was always my understanding that the taller buildings next to the highway actually do block the particulates into that open space that's a little bit behind the building. So I can't wait for all you guys to give me some more information about that, because that's what we were hoping for. The open space itself looks substantially more developed, and I'm hugely in support of moving forward with the amendment as you guys have presented. I think you did a fantastic job. I think this is precisely what we have been hoping for in on this site and for this area of the Assembly Square neighborhood. So I look forward to seeing a more fulsome staff report in a few weeks that that address some more detail. I do have a question, and it's derivative of Amelia's concerns. I understand this application is governed by the old zoning, but in the new zoning, what we had asked, and this is more of a question for staff than of the applicant. There was going to be at some point in the early part of this year, some sort of a confab where we were going to talk about increasing sustainability in lab buildings. And this was done as a result of the D2 block in Union Square, where we were looking to see what we could do, because I think they were proposing Amelia knows better than I think they were proposing lead silver, and we should not lead platinum or something like that, or the net zero building. I don't think that this application is subject to that, but I am curious to know where we are on those discussions, and if it will be worthwhile to have the applicant look to see the feasibility of meeting some of the increased sustainability standards that we were looking at potentially adopting a few months ago.
So, Mr. Chairman, this is Peter Carboni again.
Yes.
I do recall there's been a few meetings that Mayor Curtatone, I think, might have put together a staff or a smaller group with, that I'm fairly sure both Sal and Ed Nardi, they both attended, or maybe it may have been John, but I think it was somebody from our team. I personally wasn't there. We were open to a discussion around the entire issue. I personally am probably not qualified to talk enough about Eric both from an energy savings as well as the difference between the gold and the platinum and so forth. But I think if you start from where we are today, where the project today is approved on certified, certainly a commitment to go to the gold is a big step. I understand the question about can you even get to platinum, and I think that's one that Biomed has been taking a look at. I think when you combine what we've already committed to and taking the existing building down, which is it's an energy pig, really, in terms of the way the way that building uses energy today. And when you take that down, coupled with, because that wasn't even part of our first proposal, that was going to stay up. And overall, I think you're going to see huge benefit when you take everything into account for the mixed use project. I know Biomed from my conversations with Sal. They have many biotech buildings, many lab buildings. Most, if not all of them, are LEED Gold. He can speak to what else may be in the portfolio. But I think certainly as an applicant, we're always willing to have conversations with the city about better ways to do things, and want to maintain that open dialogue with, whether it's through Mayor Curtatone's task force that he put together, or the planning staff or whatnot. So I think the purposes of today, let us give it some more thought. Maybe Sal, if you want to comment more, but I'm not sure there's much more we can say today. But
to be honest, I actually don't know if this is a conversation that we should be having at this stage in the application, because there's a master plan. I'm actually wondering if this is something that would be better addressed when we come forward with individual building designs and permits for those. And my question was, less so to the applicant, but I appreciate your response, and more so to staff, just to see where we are on this, because this was a concern that this was raised a few months ago, and this was something that was supposed to get at least a series of meetings and discussions and study groups, all that good stuff, kind of the beginning of the year. And I'm sure COVID messed everything up, but I'm just curious, what happened to that plan?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Sarah Lewis. We did have we called it a Lead for Labs Summit. So we are still gelling through, trying to understand sort of a lot of the information that we received at that meeting. The quick summary is the difficulty with labs. The argument that's generally made is because the tenant spaces are often speculative. When a core and shell is built, that can be LEED Platinum, so that's the basic part of the building. That's not the difficulty. What ends up happening is because a person who's a team that's building the base building doesn't necessarily know who the tenants are going to be, those are harder to sort of predict ahead of time. So at least that's sort of the general comment that we ended up hearing. Of course, there are companies out there that are completely willing to do the commit to the full LEED Platinum. I don't fully, sort of understand sort of what that business model is, but it definitely seems to be more difficult in lab buildings than it is in other types of buildings because of the nature of the tenancy. And I think sort of if you probably Amelia is a better detailed answer to be able to answer some of these questions, to be honest. She was there and she's more of an expert in the LEED process than I am.
Chair, if I may add to
rely on Amelia's advice all the time when it comes to this stuff. So again, like I said, I don't think this particular night is where we're going to hammer down on this, but it is something that we're going to look to Amelia's expertise on, as well as the results of those LEED for Labs meetings that we started to have, and conclusions that come out of there, because I think it's something that if possible, we should strive for. It's important. So,
Mr. Chair, if I might just add, I agree there will be time for a robust conversation on this topic at the special permit stage. But because of the nature of this development, the applicant actually has a unique opportunity. That was another item I'd wanted to ask about this evening, to pursue sort of district scale energy solutions, or at least there are additional sustainability measures that are available to the applicant because of the scale of the project as a whole, agnostic of it being a phased project. And I would encourage this board to continue having the conversation with the applicant at this stage to ensure that if there are opportunities to improve the overall environmental performance of the development, that we are not missing them by leaving them aside to a later stage, because this is exactly the value of sort of a front-loaded integrated design process.
Thank you for your comment. Do we have any more discussion tonight? Because as I said, this is not something that we'll be voting on this evening. This is something that we're going to be waiting for staff to come in with a more updated and fulsome report to us. So if do folks have any questions for the applicant or for the staff at this point? Don't forget, we can always bring them back more.
Yeah, if I, Chairman, if I may just weigh in on the LEED standard and the additional measures. So it is
Sure,
something we do have.
Introduce yourself for the record.
Yep, it's Sal Zeno from Biomed. We do have, as Peter mentioned, we do have a few buildings in our portfolio that are platinum certified. This is another case where, you know, we're a bit concerned that some of the limitations that platinum level certification could put on the core shell could impact our ability to cast a wider net when it comes to finding a tenant for these buildings. It will certainly cause some limitations there, and we want to maintain as much flexibility to ensure that this is ultimately a successful project. With that said, we do have, it is a strong focus of our sustainability. We have actually an in-house team that's focused on it, on operating our buildings and ensuring that they're sustainable. They're constantly making changes to the buildings and improvements to accommodate that. And these are on buildings with triple net leases where, you know, tenants are actually paying the utility fees. We are still incentivized. And then on your note about district energy is something that we were actually looking at with our engineering team. It's kind of hot off the press. We've been looking at it a bit over the past few weeks and trying to understand what's out there. We do rely on district energy for a number of our buildings in Kendall, so it's something that we're familiar with. We have a good relationship with the guys at Vicinity over there, previously Veolia. So, you know, it's definitely something that's out there and something that we're working on. So we appreciate the comments there. Thank you.
I'm very glad to hear it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I assume it's my computer that everybody looks frozen right now. So I apologize if I'm also frozen. Okay, great. So at this point, if nobody has any further, because I can't see visual cues because everybody looks frozen to me because apparently my internet is weird. Does anybody have any further questions or comments for staff of the applicant on this particular project?
No, I don't believe so.
Thank you. Seeing none, I'm going to thank the applicant for their presentation and for the answers to the questions and concerns that we and the public raised tonight. And I look forward to seeing you at a meeting in the future. Okay, now it looks like we're all back, to me at least. So I'm going to go on to the last item on our agenda. Let me bring it back up. I apologize. Do we know if Rob has kicked out for good, or is he still out there in the ether somewhere?
Mr.
He doesn't
Chair, this
appear
is
on my list. Okay.
Mr. Chair, I'm working on getting him back. Give me just a second.
He doesn't have to for the minutes. If he wants to, he can. I'll give him another minute or so in case he wants to rejoin.
Mr. Chair, I have reached out and hasn't responded yet, but let's definitely give him just a minute.
Okay, that's fine.
Rebecca, it's Peter Carboni. Could I just ask a question? I'm not sure if the board may need to make a vote just to continue our hearing, just procedurally, or if that may need to happen.
Usually not, because it's not a formal continuance, but we can move to continue the discussion to a future meeting. When's the next regularly scheduled meeting? Do we know?
Mr. Chair, this is Rebecca speaking. I was about to raise that point, and our next meeting will be on July the 16th in 3 weeks, as clerk had noted.
Okay, then let's do this. Let's for the purpose. I see Amelia has a question, and I will leave it open for written testimony. Our next meeting is the 16th. I'm going to leave written comment open until noon on Friday, July 10th. And depending on what we get for a new application and things that may be extended, but for now it's closing on July 10th for written testimony. The chair will move to continue this application and further discussion with an amended staff report until our July 16th meeting, seconded by the clerk. Roll call vote. Chair votes aye.
Sam votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Okay. We will see you back here in a few weeks, presuming we're ready to go in a few weeks. If not, we will see you sometime thereafter. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Okay, bringing up the agenda, I do not see a Rob. We have three meetings for which minutes need to be approved. March 26th, April 23, and April 30th. We have previously received advice from the solicitor's office when we had a huge glut of back minutes that we hadn't approved for years and years and years, including some where voting members of the planning board weren't even members of the planning board at the time. So the advice that we received from council was that minutes that even members who weren't on the board for at the time could vote on them, so long as they could vote that they would accurately represent what the meeting minutes should be, right? So there's not a glaring error that, King Kong wasn't, a presenter at the meeting. So that being the case, has everybody had a chance to review the minutes that have been sent around? Okay. In that case, we're going to move for consideration and adoption of each of these minutes, and we'll start with the March 26th, 2020 meeting minutes. Does anybody have any comments or revisions, proposed revisions to those minutes? Seeing none, the chair moves to approve the minutes of the March 26th, 2020 meeting, seconded by the clerk. Roll call vote. Chair votes aye.
Sam votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Those minutes are adopted. Moving on to the minutes of April 23, 2020. Does anybody have any comments or questions or revisions to those minutes? No. Seeing none, the chair moves to adopt those meeting minutes, seconded by the clerk. Roll call vote. Chair votes aye.
Sam votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Okay, the April 23rd, 2020 meeting minutes have been approved. The April 30th, 2020 meeting minutes. Does anybody have any revisions or comments on those minutes? Okay, that being the case, the chair moves to adopt the April 30th, 2020 meeting minutes. Chair votes aye.
Sam votes aye. And seconds
Amelia
the motion
votes
if you didn't say that.
Correct. Amelia, did you vote?
Amelia votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Thank you very much. All we have meeting minutes. That is all of the business that I'm aware of that's before the planning board this evening. We will reconvene in 3 weeks on July the 16th at 6 o'clock, I presume virtually. The chair moves to adjourn, seconded by the clerk. Roll call vote. Chair votes aye.
Sam votes aye.
Amelia votes aye.
Jahan votes aye.
Thank you, everybody. Please have a good night. Stay safe, and I'll see you in a few weeks.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Melissa.